Breaking news from RTV6.
We're at the State House standing by for Governor Pence. Governor Pence expected to address reporters in just a few minutes regarding ISTEP testing. This comes after Superintendent of Public Instruction Glenda Ritz announced that she would be calling a special meeting for Friday morning to discuss this matter. We'll take you live inside right now.
Had more than doubled. I said then and earlier this week that I was deeply troubled that this test had more than doubled. And I called for immediate action to shorten the test to lessen the burden on Hoosier kids, on families, on teachers. Consistent with that, I signed an executive order to retain an independent consultant, a nationally recognized expert in assessments. We announced earlier the contracting with Dr. Edward Rober. Today I'm adding to that in materials that you should have before you. A contract with Dr. Bill Audie of Oregon, who will join Dr. Rober in reviewing the ISTEP test with the express purpose of significantly reducing the length of the test. Secondly, I just got off the phone with Superintendent Glenda Ritz, and I am pleased to report that the superintendent and the Department of Education have agreed to release all requested information to the state's consultants, and also to greenlight and approve the direct connection between our consultants and CTB McGraw-Hill that has crafted and will be responsible for the test and any changes that we make. I'm also pleased that the superintendent agreed to make shortening the test a priority at this Friday's meeting of the State Board of Education. I'm also very appreciative of the fact that CTB McGraw-Hill has pledged its cooperation. And you should have before you a copy of correspondence that CTB McGraw-Hill issued yesterday indicating their cooperation and also making, I believe, 7 different recommendations for how we could significantly shorten the length of this test. I am grateful for the cooperation of McGraw-Hill. I am especially grateful for the cooperation of the Indiana Department of Education and Superintendent Glenda Ritz. I believe with the cooperation that we now have in place between the outside consultants that we've retained, with the superintendent and the Department of Education, with our vendor, as well as with members of the State Board of Education, I'm confident that we can significantly shorten this test and lessen the burden it was poised to place on Indiana's kids, on families, and on our teachers. It is important to note that the Indiana Department of Education remains solely responsible for developing and administering this test. And the Department of Education retains the responsibility for shortening the test. But because of the cooperation that we're announcing today, I'm confident that in short order we will have substantive recommendations that will inform the State Board of Education and give the Indiana Department of Education options to significantly reduce the length of this test. Hoosier families should be encouraged to see us working together to work this problem and to lessen the burden of our kids without compromising the validity of this test or compromising our accountability system, known as our A to F program. We can shorten this test. We have time to do it. And now with this cooperation that we are announcing today, I'm confident we will do just that. I am encouraged by the cooperation from the superintendent's office, across the Department of Education and McGraw-Hill. And our outside consultants are working earnestly, beginning today, to evaluate the metes and bounds of this test and make substantive recommendations. Hopefully by this Friday, we're asking our consultants to develop preliminary recommendations for significantly shortening this test, and we'll move forward on that as the experts counsel. I am confident that working together we can shorten this test without compromising the validity of the exam or our A to F accountability system. Questions?
Governor, should the legislation required to accomplish
Jim.
that?
I'm sorry, Jim, I didn't hear your question.
Is any legislation required to accomplish that? Yesterday, the Department of Education said they may need legislation to lift some of these requirements.
Well, let me say we've been in full consultation with the leadership of the General Assembly, and I have also discussed this matter personally with the Democratic leadership of the General Assembly earlier this week. And if there is a need for legislation to give us the flexibility to shorten this test, I'm confident that it will receive a favorable consideration before the General Assembly. But let's be clear, neither state nor federal standards stipulate the length of the test. Let me say that again. Neither state nor federal standards or the requirements that we have under state or federal law stipulate the length of the test. So we have the flexibility, I believe, unless our experts and everyone working together has a different observation. I think we've got the flexibility to significantly shorten this test and lessen the burden on Hoosier kids without compromising the validity of the test or compromising our accountability system, and that'll be our aim. But if we need to go to the General Assembly, we'll be prepared to do that.
CTV does say in this letter you've given us, several of their options, or some of their options, include going back to last year's test, at least in part, and other ones it says right in this letter that they could have implications with respect to legislative requirements, federal requirements, waivers, and peer review. So it sounds like CTV is making suggestions for shortening things that have concerns about what the implications would be legally and legislatively. Are you concerned at all about that?
I don't want to presuppose the review of the assessment experts, but if you look at page 2 of the letter, you'll actually see 7 very specific recommendations by CTB. It's on the back side of the document you have. In several cases, those recommendations, which, again, this is the vendor, this is the company that has developed the test for the state of Indiana, has identified measures that could significantly shorten this test. So I want to just say I want to listen to the experts. I don't want to prejudge what the solutions are here. My aim is that we would move forward with this test, significantly shortened. As I said Monday, doubling the length of the ISTEP test is just unacceptable. And it puts an unacceptable hardship on our kids, on our families, on our teachers. And I'm very confident, based upon the cooperative spirit and on preliminary recommendations by McGraw-Hill and by some preliminary analysis, that we can do just that.
Governor, on Friday's State Board of Education agenda, there is a resolution that basically put a year moratorium on all of Indiana's accountability standards, interventions, etc. Do you feel confident with conversations you've had with the superintendent today that resolution is no longer necessary?
Well, there was a resolution distributed last night to the State Board of Education. Calls for suspending our A to F program this year. There's other measures regarding teacher evaluations and actually suspending our iRead 3 program. Let me be clear. We grade our kids every day. We can grade our schools every year. Accountability is important to the progress that Indiana has made and will continue to make in education. Our parents deserve to know how their kids are doing in school. Our parents also deserve to know how their schools are doing. And our A to F program is essential to that. The answer here is not to suspend our school grading program. The answer here is to shorten the test and make sure the test has the integrity and the validity to support our accountability system, and that we will do.
When a few of us spoke, or most of us here spoke with the Department yesterday, they made it seem like if parts were removed, they would have to be, at some point, you would still have to take some of these questions so they can field test. So, I mean, is there any plan in place for how that would happen? It seems like you just can't remove questions and not have them be asked.
Well, again, I don't want to presuppose on the experts, and I want to wait for the expert analysis. When the superintendent and I talked today, there were a couple of options, including the fact that we didn't pilot this test last spring, as the State Board of Education had encouraged. We didn't pilot it last fall, as the State Board of Education had encouraged. One of the reality is we're piloting questions at the same time that we're administering the exam. And as the superintendent and I talked, there may be options about moving some of the piloting to next year. I want to leave that to the experts. My objective as governor is to lessen the burden on our kids and on our families while preserving the validity of this exam. And I'm confident with the cooperation that we're announcing today that we can accomplish that.
If we just move,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, if we just move some of the questions to next year, aren't we just shifting the burden to the kids next year?
What I want to say is that had we done the piloting last year, it would have involved about 1,000 kids. Okay? And there's a way you can pilot without administering the test to all of the children in the program. By marrying the piloting to the administration of the test itself, then my understanding is all the kids take all the pilot questions. Okay? So this is about statistical analysis, and people who are experts in this area. I defer to their judgment. I defer to their recommendations, including the superintendents, including the experts at the Indiana Department of Education. I'm just very grateful for the cooperation that we have garnered today to work together. And there is a real spirit in this building between our administration, the Indiana Department of Education, members of the General Assembly, to work this problem, solve the problem, lessen the burden on our kids and our families, and we will get that done.
Have you had any conversation with the U.S. Department of Education? Does anybody to see if they'd be okay with any of these recommendations? Or does it not matter? Is it not an issue in your mind if the federal waiver is rejected?
I talked to the Secretary of Education this week.
What did he tell you?
Well, I told him we were very concerned about the doubling of the length of this test, and I asked for him to be prepared for requests for additional flexibility should it be required by the state of Indiana, and he expressed a willingness to be open to that. And so, short answer to that is yes. And we'll work with all interested parties to make sure that we lessen the burden on our kids. I know a lot of people want to make a lot of this kind of thing, and in this building, we occasionally have disagreements. But I will tell you, I'm very encouraged today that everybody's focused on the kids, everybody's focused on working the problem, everybody's focused on shortening this test, and I'm grateful for that.
Governor, what will the cost be of restructuring the test for students?
I don't think we know. I don't think we know the answer to that question until we get the recommendations. I do know that the contract that we announced today with the second consultant is, I think, very similar. OMB will do a release on that, very similar to the contract with our first consultant. And again, these are two nationally recognized assessment experts who work with states across the country and have worked with the U.S. Department of Education. And I believe they're going to bring a tremendous amount of experience to bear on how we shorten this test while maintaining the validity of the data and the validity of the results.
Governor, do you trust the superintendent?
I have a very good relationship with the superintendent. I can honestly say we've never had a cross word between us. And we had a very productive and constructive conversation today. And I want to say very sincerely, I'm very grateful. I'm grateful that the superintendent has directed both her team at the Department of Education as well as our vendor at McGraw-Hill to work in a collaborative fashion to identify ways that we can significantly shorten this test.
The McGraw-Hill letters suggest that the best way to reduce the test is to get rid of the part of the open-ended portion. Wouldn't that be getting rid of some of the rigor that you insisted it be in our new standard?
I don't believe that's the case, but I want to listen to the experts. I really do. I mean, there's an educator in our family, and it's not me. Okay. I did talk to that school teacher. Well, she taught second grade for a lot of years. But thanks for acknowledging she's an art teacher too. I believe that listening to and leaning on the professionals that we brought to bear on this, leaning on the professionals in the Department of Education, we're going to find a way to shorten this test and lessen the burden on Hoosier families. And we're going to be able to administer this test this spring. We're going to get the kind of valid results that will support our accountability system in Indiana. And I think that's something every Hoosier should be grateful for. But we have to move. I want to be clear on this. We have to move quickly. It's one of the reasons I took the action that I took on Monday. I didn't think the time is of the essence here, with round one starting in just a few weeks down the road. But on a practical level, I'm very confident that we have time to make the changes in this test to embrace recommendations from established experts, lessen the burden on our kids, and still get the results that will support our accountability system and our A to F program.
Governor Pence, as I understand, school districts already have their materials to administer Part 1. Do you expect most of the changes to be made to Part 2, or do you expect shortening of Part 1 as well?
Well, I asked that very same question because, like all of you, I've seen the television images of forklifts hauling in booklets, and the short answer to your question is I'm very confident that we have time to make the changes in this test, whether it be directing our schools to only complete a portion of the written exam, or recognizing the fact that the vast majority of this test is administered digitally, recognizing that we have the ability, we have the flexibility in the administration of this test to make the changes. Parents ought to be encouraged by that. Go ahead.
Would you say that the fact that given the schools that standards last year has led to the problem?
Neither state nor federal standards stipulate the length of the test. Look, we worked in a collaborative way with Superintendent Ritz and the Department of Education to craft new standards. They were adopted by our Education Roundtable, adopted by the State Board of Education. And they were written by Hoosiers and for Hoosiers, and they're uncommonly high. But look, just because the material in the class is tougher doesn't mean the test has to be longer. Okay? I mean, the test you take at the end of Algebra 1 versus the test you take at the end of Algebra 3 isn't necessarily a longer test, just a harder test. Okay? So we raised our standards in Indiana. We fully expect this new ISTEP Plus test to reflect those standards. And that's the aim here. It doesn't need to be longer. And we're sending that message very clearly. I think people all across the state of Indiana are sending that message very clearly to leaders here at the State House. And the Hoosiers can be confident that we're going to work together, we're going to listen to the experts, we're going to maintain those high standards, but we're going to shorten this test.
You're saying calculating a more complicated formula, for example, or a math problem doesn't necessarily, that might not take longer to do something more complicated than it does to do something more simple.
No, I don't think I said that. I mean, 1 + 1 = 2 is, you can get that done quicker than some algorithm. I'm just using the analogy in my mind from the standpoint of common sense that just because the material is tougher doesn't mean the final exam is longer. I mean, folks, look, for third graders in Indiana, I think the estimate here is that we're going to double the length of this test. It's almost as long as the bar exam. And I tell you that, that's very troubling to families. I was just upstairs talking to a couple of moms who are dedicated students at Ivy Tech. They both came up to me and thanked me. They thanked me for stepping up and doing something to lessen the burden, because you could tell they were very troubled in their hearts about their grade school child facing a much longer test and what that might mean for them, for their performance, and for their school. So that's the aim here. But let me be very clear. I really do believe the good news today for Hoosiers is that we're all working together. And we're going to figure this out. And I'm much less interested in the rearview mirror look on this as I am in working the problem, shortening the test, maintaining our system of assessment, which is our testing system, and then maintaining our accountability, which is our A to F system. And this we will get done.
Are we also changing how students are tested?
I'm sorry, say again.
Also changing how students are tested. It's the same material, but it's no longer 50 multiple choice questions. We're asking them to answer essay questions and written questions and explain how they came up with it instead of filling them out. Didn't that take more time?
Well, to be honest with you, I don't know the answer to that question, but we're asking those questions. We really are. I do know that at least an initial look at this by some of our folks is there's been a significant increase in the reading comprehension elements of it, and so that may be redundant of other things that we do here in this state and that I support. But I guess what I really want to say to you, in a real spirit of humility, is we brought the experts to bear on this. Everybody's going to be working together, from the Department of Education, the Superintendent's Office, to our administration, to, if need be, members of the General Assembly. We're going to work the problem. We're going to shorten the test. And the initial look at this is that we can get that done. And Hoosiers, I think Hoosiers soon will have a better idea of what that looks like, but I am urging our consultants to have preliminary recommendations by this Friday for the State Board of Education to consider. Not final recommendations, but we're looking for some preliminary recommendations by our consultants so that we can begin the dialogue, begin the discussion, and solve the problem.
Do you think there was a coordinated plan to basically create confusion enough that we would suspend accountability for a year?
You know me, I never speculate on motives. There's really not a lot of profit in that. I always want to assume good faith by everybody involved, okay? And that's what Hoosiers can see today. I was grateful for the cooperation that the superintendent expressed in our telephone call today, and we're going to build on that cooperation, and we're going to solve the problem. We're going to shorten the test, we're going to administer the test, and we're going to maintain accountability in Indiana that has been, in so many ways, an important element of the progress that we've made in our schools in recent years.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.